nestled in the California Delta. Amongst the sleepy canals and orchards is the town of Walnut Grove. Here, amongst the pastel facades and rusting metal buildings, lies the Miyazaki Bathhouse. Constructed in 1915, the bathhouse served the Japanese community for decades. It was a place to relax and wash off the dust after a long day in the fields. Yet, as the community changed, the baths were eventually abandoned. This is the story of the Miyazaki Bathhouse, its beginning, end, and rebirth. The Miyazaki Bathhouse is linked to the California Delta. The Delta, as the locals call it, is a marshy region of waterways and floodplains stretching from Sacramento to the San Francisco Bay. It first gained prominence as a route to the Sierra Nevada mountains during the California Gold Rush of 1849. Then, from the 1850s to 1870s, Chinese immigrants were contracted to improve shipping routes and expand arable land. Through their efforts, marshy swampland was transformed into fertile fields. It was no longer gold that beckoned immigrants, but the chance to work the land. As the region developed, so too did Walnut Grove. The Chinese began to settle there, and then the Japanese. By 1915, Walnut Grove was comprised of white, Chinese, Japanese, and Filipino immigrants. However, none, except for whites, could own farmland. Instead, immigrants were crammed together in extremely close boarding houses.
And so in 1915, there was a fire that started, well, the Chinese say it started in the Japanese community, and the Japanese say it started in the Chinese community. From that point, there, as part of the rebuilding, there was a dedicated Chinese community and a dedicated Japanese community. C Street essentially had an invisible wall in the middle of the street with the Chinese to the west and the Japanese to the east.
Many of the new boarding houses did not have indoor plumbing, and the Miyazaki family saw the opportunity to build a bathhouse.
So this was an integral part of the community, it served a basis of a social gathering place. The larger tub was for the men, the smaller was for the women, but in the mornings, the women, they would come and take over the whole bathhouse. And then in the evening, all the men coming out of the fields would take over the whole bathhouse.
It served the Japanese community throughout the 1920s, 30s, and into the 40s. However, with the outbreak of World War II, the Japanese were suspected of disloyalty and forced into internment camps.
So ultimately, they were given very little notice. They had about 6 hours to pack all their things and leave. This changed the whole dynamic of Walnut Grove, and that the Japanese all left. At the end of the war, with the accepting the Japanese people back and giving them citizen rights, and also the Chinese really got their citizens' rights at that point also, then they could live wherever they wanted to, they could own property, and so from there a lot of people left this area.
The bathhouse remained open through the 1960s. But times were changing. And throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, people continued to abandon the community for better living conditions and more amenities.
The quality of life changed, and people had the freedom to live other places and have their own houses with their own bathing facilities. There was no longer the need for say, this commercial bathhouse. So when I purchased it, it was a jungle. There were trees in the space, actually right where I'm sitting. You know, only the tubs existed in the back. So I had to do a little historic research and find documentation of what the baths look like. I basically rebuilt the whole back of the building as it was originally. It was a long process, about a 10-year process to restore the whole building. And so what you see is as close as possible to what the original building was like.
Today, Walnut Grove is a sleepy town. Yet, the reopening of the bathhouse in 2011 brought new life to the community through visitors coming to experience the historic baths. A time capsule of a bygone era, Walnut Grove and the Miyazaki Bathhouse offers a window into the past. And a glimpse into the future.